So the name of the people who are going to be on these goofy ass Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders task forces came out the other day, and a lot of people have strong opinions about this issue. Some people are saying whether or not progressives do these task forces, it doesn't really make any difference. There are some delusional people like Cenk Uygur and other people at the Young Turks and David Pakman who are trying to make the argument or trying to convince people that, I don't know, maybe something good could come out of this. They're trying to convince people that there's even a possibility that these task forces could be a net positive for the left. And there are just some logical inconsistencies with that line of thought that I've yet to hear anybody address. How on earth are they actually going to move Joe Biden and these task forces to the left? How is that going to work? Because let's, for a second, put aside Joe Biden's mile-long, 40-year-long track record of consistently right-wing policy. Just put that aside for a second, even though I think that's honestly one of the biggest factors in deciding whether or not these task forces are going to be worth anything. What exactly are AOC and Bernie and Pramila Jayapal going to do to move Joe Biden to the left? It's not like they're going to be making any new arguments that Joe Biden and his team haven't heard already. It's not like Joe Biden and his team haven't heard the horrific statistics around our disgusting for-profit health insurance system that we have in the United States, where 40,000 people die every single year because they can't afford basic health care. It's not like they don't know that. It's not like they don't know 500,000 people go bankrupt every year because they can't afford to pay their medical bills. They know these statistics. They know these numbers. They know that every other modern country in the world has a form of single payer healthcare. They know all these things, and they're still against it. So what on earth are these people going to say in these task forces to move Joe Biden to the left? And furthermore, the idea that there's some kind of negotiation going on here is just a farce, because Joe Biden already has everything he can possibly want from Bernie Sanders and AOC and all these other progressives who he got to go along with this task force. He got everything he wanted from them. So what would they be negotiating for? You already said you're going to, you already endorsed Joe Biden. You've already said time and time again, you're going to try to mobilize as many of your followers as possible to go vote for Joe Biden. So what incentive does Joe Biden have to listen to anything you say in these task forces? So just the idea that this is some good faith negotiation and there's a possibility of moving Joe Biden to the left is a farce. And anyone saying otherwise is either an idiot or a liar. I'm definitely not in the camp of we can get anything positive out of these task forces. I'm also not even in the camp that thinks that either way these task forces don't mean anything and they're useless. I think I have a more pessimistic view of this. I think these are worse than useless. I think these are going to be harmful to the left and to anybody whose goals are progressive policies that were in Bernie Sanders' platform. These task forces are going to be harmful. And Crystal Ball she made a great point about this. What you're doing by having all these prominent lefties, Stephanie Kelton and Pramila Jayapal, Bernie Sanders, all these prominent leaders in the left-wing movement, when you have them joining these task forces, you're essentially defanging your biggest critics. You are neutralizing them and making sure that they aren't going to be a threat, lobbing bombs at Joe Biden, harshly criticizing Joe Biden from the outside. And I think that's exactly right. More than that, people need to understand that with everything you do in life, there's opportunity cost. There's a finite amount of time you have in a day, in a week, a month, whatever, to get stuff done. And if all these progressives are going to spend, I don't know however many hours on these useless task force, writing up useless reports and doing research and reviewing papers and submitting papers and doing speeches and press conferences and town halls and all whatever useless shit that they do in this task force. When they're doing all of that, they aren't actually doing things that would advance what they say their goals are, which would be like a Green New Deal or Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, ending the wars, whatever progressive policy priorities you want to choose. Instead of Pramila Jayapal taking this unprecedented opportunity to, in the midst of a global pandemic where at least to this point 40 million people have lost their jobs, and in doing so have lost their health insurance. More people are uninsured now than they've ever been, ever at any time in recent history. Instead of taking that opportunity to organize the lefties in Congress who support Medicare for all, a single payer, to pressure Nancy Pelosi and confront her as to why she's opposing Medicare for all in the middle of a global pandemic, instead of organizing to get Medicare for all, she's conceded that fight. She threw her hands up and she said, all right, best I can do, I guess, is join Joe Biden and his shitty healthcare task force. And where their expressed goal of that healthcare task force of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders is to get the Medicare, lower the Medicare eligibility age to 60. So like I said, instead of fighting for Medicare for all, using this unprecedented leverage that she has to force Nancy Pelosi into introducing a Medicare for all bill, she's conceding that fight, and she's going to write a bunch of bullshit papers and do research and do a bunch of town halls and whatever press conferences about this shitty task force to get Medicare eligibility lowered to 60. That's what she's doing. AOC, like I said, you have this opportunity that nobody could have ever imagined, where basically entire economy shut down, everybody's stuck in their house. If AOC was serious about the Green New Deal, if AOC was serious about getting work done on a multi-trillion-dollar green infrastructure program across the country, why not use this opportunity to make the case and pressure Nancy Pelosi into doing that? Why not organize a sit-in similar to what the Sunrise Movement did when Nancy Pelosi came in as Speaker of the House? Why not organize a similar protest with climate activists and flood Nancy Pelosi's office and demand that she at least introduce some parts of the Green New Deal, which would also, by the way, create millions of jobs to combat the record unemployment that we're dealing with? No, instead of doing that, she's going to sit on a shitty climate change task force of Joe Biden's, and she's going to write a bunch of papers with John Kerry and do some research, and she's going to do some press conferences and talk up Joe Biden's bold climate proposals. She's going to do all that shit and know it doesn't amount to anything close to what we need to combat the actual climate catastrophe that we're facing right now. She's going to do all of that instead of actually doing the hard work of organizing and pressuring Nancy Pelosi to implementing parts of the Green New Deal, which would also deal with some of the economic fallout of the depression that the coronavirus started. Which brings me to the title of this video, which is kind of inflammatory, but it's definitely true, that all these progressives, as hard as it is to say, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Pramila Jayapal, all of these people who are a part of these task forces, they are all sellouts. People have this idea that the only way you can be a sellout is in exchange for cash, betraying your principles, going against your policy beliefs in exchange for cash. That's the only way you could be a sellout. But that's not true. And I have the definition of sellout to prove my point. Quote, a betrayal of one's principles for reasons of expedience. That's exactly what they're doing here. They are betraying their principles for expediency. It was AOC's principled position that the climate crisis is at such a cataclysmic level that the only way that we could adequately respond to this and deal with the crisis is a multi-trillion-dollar green infrastructure program to get us off of fossil fuels and bring us down to net zero carbon emissions in the span of 10 to 12 years. Those were her principles. But now, Instead of fighting for that, like I said, I explained how she could be fighting for that. Instead of fighting for that, she's taking the path of least resistance, and she's going to go along with this shitty task force that we know is not going to produce anything close to adequate response to the climate crisis. Because at the end of the day, Joe Biden is funded by the fossil fuel industry. At the end of the day, Joe Biden is going to appoint people from that very same industry, executives from that very same industry, lobbyists from that very same industry to head his climate response. So whatever she thinks she's going to do in this task force, it isn't going to get past them. And she has to understand that. But she's taking the path of least resistance, and she doesn't want to really ruffle the feathers of the leadership in the Democratic Party. She doesn't really want to have the mainstream media come out and say she's helping Donald Trump get elected by withholding support for Joe Biden until he supports the Green New Deal. She doesn't want to do any of the hard work. So she's just going to go along with this task force, even though she knows it's not going to do anything. She's betraying her principles for expediency. And the same with Pramila Jayapal. Her principal belief was, hey, way too many people in this country are dying because they can't afford healthcare. And that's not a thing in any other country. That's unethical. That's immoral. And anybody who supports this for-profit private health insurance system is dead wrong. And they're not working on behalf of the American people. That was her principal belief, and now she's on a task force not to fight for Medicare for all, because we know it's not going to come out of that task force. She's not pressuring Nancy Pelosi, like I said, to introduce Medicare for all in the House. She gave up. She conceded the fight for Medicare for all, sold out her principles, and now she's taking the path of least resistance, and she's going to go on a shitty task force where their express goal is to lower the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 60. Wow. But that's what Pramila Jayapal is fighting for right now. And them being sellout, it extends just beyond these laughable, goofy-ass task forces. Even on the idea of endorsing and supporting and trying to get Joe Biden elected. Just them doing that is proof that they're sellouts. Because their principal belief was the only way to get real change, the only way to get the real policies that we think are going to improve the lives of people in this country, the working class in this country, like Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, ending the wars, free college, a Green New Deal. The only way we can do those things is through a political revolution where grassroots organization takes on the corrupt political establishment in a knockdown, drag-out fight. That's the only way we can get those policies implemented. And the people standing in the way of that are not just the Republicans, it's the corrupt corporate Democrats who also believe in that same neoliberal, corporatist economic policy, and also the same militaristic, imperialistic foreign policy. The only way we can get anything done positive in this country of substance is through a political revolution. It's by taking on the political establishment. That was their core principle. But now that Bernie Sanders has lost the primary, now that fight has gotten even harder than they expected, they threw all that out the window. None of that matters anymore, and they're going to break their backs to elect Joe Biden, the embodiment of neoliberal corporatism and warmongering and imperialist U.S. foreign policy. They're going to do everything they can to elect them. If that's not a sellout, I don't know what is. You've abandoned the fight for the policy priorities that you say are most important in order to elect somebody who is guaranteed to do everything in his power to make sure that those things don't happen and to continue the status quo. Their actions in Congress have also shown that they're just sellouts. Unprecedented economic crisis brought about by a global pandemic. First response by the Republicans and the corporate Democrats, bail out corporations and the rich to the tunes of trillions of dollars, no strings attached. The progressives, their principal position was fuck bailing out the corporations. The people, the regular working class in this country need a bailout first before you do anything about the corporations. That was their principal position. But when the time came, when it came down to the wire, what did they do? They took the path of least resistance. They sold out. They abandoned their principles, and they said, fuck it, I'll go along with the corporate bailout. And even though it was going to pass anyway, they didn't have the backbone, they didn't have the spine, they did not have the Constitution to say, I'm not voting for it because it goes directly against my principles. No, they just went along with it. And then they went in, they bragged about what the shitty crumbs that they got in the bill to the lefties in the country. And then they try to gaslight them and say, oh, no, don't worry, all the good stuff, the UBI, the $2,000 monthly recurring payments, the hazard pay, the guaranteed protective equipment for frontline workers. Oh, all of that stuff, the rent freeze. Oh, it's all going to be in the next bill. Trust me, it's all going to be in the next bill. Five coronavirus relief bills later, 4 or 5 coronavirus relief bills later, still got none of that. And they are still every single one of them keep going along with all of these other shitty corporate bailouts that have been the coronavirus relief packages. Every single one of those times, they sold out their principles, which were let's help the regular working class of the people, and they took the path of least resistance of, all right, I don't want to cause a ruckus in Congress. I don't want to be the oddball out here, so I'm just going to go along. I'm going to go along to get along. So they're sellouts. And in just even a broader sense, what was she running her whole campaign on when she was in the Justice Democrats, this insurgent campaign to take on Democratic leadership? Her position was the leadership in the party is so insanely corrupt. There is no negotiating with these people. There is a civil war for the control of the Democratic Party, and we need to force them out. And that is the only way we're going to get progressive policy priorities through. That was her principal position. Those were her principal beliefs before she got into Congress. Now she's operating in an entirely different way. Now it's, I don't want to ruffle the feathers of Nancy Pelosi. I don't want to be too brash. I don't want to be cantankerous. I don't want to be antagonistic to leadership of the Democratic Party. So I'll never call them out. And I'll never say a bad word about Nancy Pelosi. I'll never say that she's blocking UBI. I'll never say she's blocking rent freezes and hazard pay and protective equipment to frontline workers. I will never say any of those things about Nancy Pelosi. I'm just going to keep my head down and write some strongly worded letters to Nancy Pelosi and hope she takes me seriously. That's not what she was running on when she was running against Joe Crowley. And the only explanation for the change in her the way she operates is she sold out. She's no longer standing by those principles of the Democratic Party is so corrupt and you're incapable of negotiating with them. Now she's saying, maybe we can try to. Maybe we can just go the path of least resistance and not really buck the Democratic leadership too much. You sold out. You sold out. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in independent media, lefty media, who are bending over backwards and are hesitating so hard and so obviously to state what is clear and evident to all of us who are paying attention, that these people are sellouts. They don't want to do it for many reasons. They want to keep hope alive in the lefty movement, or they've become personally acquainted with these different lefty politicians, or whatever the reason is. Oh, this is another reason. Oh, Jordan Sheridan says this all the time. Yeah, Bernie's doing a lot of shitty stuff, but I don't want to call him a sellout because he did good things in the past, and I don't want to call him a sellout because he did good things previously. Calling somebody a sellout doesn't just negate the fact that they did good things previously. In fact, that is a requirement before you could be called a sellout. You have to show that you at some point had principles and were willing to fight on certain issues before you could even betray them. So just saying Bernie Sanders, AOC, they've done good things before, that means they can't ever be a sellout. That is just by definition wrong. So this is where we're at. These task forces, they're going to be a net negative. They're going to harm the progressive movement. And I don't know what it's going to take for everybody to see that. I hope it's not going to be too late. But I've already made clear my position on this and how I feel about the elected progressives in this country. They are sellouts. They are useless. They may not be as corrupt as the corporate Democrats, but they produce the same results as them, which is no Medicare for all, no $15 minimum wage, no Green New Deal, no ending U.S. imperialism and ending the endless wars. None of that stuff. They produce the same results as corporate Democrats and as Republicans.